Hello, everybody. If you're out there in Facebook world or Zoom world, my name's Matt Ward. I'm the publisher and owner of Uro Publications, both the Bookshop by Uro and the publishing house. We're a specialist architecture and design bookstore based in Melbourne in the Collingwood Yards. As you can see behind me, this is a blue screen backdrop. We're not officially open to the public at the moment, at least not physically, but of course we are online. And I'm very, very happy to be able to be joined tonight by Penny Craswell for a virtual in-store event. Penny is the author of Design Lives Here, which is a Thames Hudson publication that was released earlier in the year in the middle of the pandemic. We would have loved to have had her in store for real, but this virtual event is certainly a great pleasure to be able to host. So I'm very grateful to her to agreeing to this evening's quick Q&A. Some of you have probably already purchased the book. You're possibly already aware of it. It has been out for a couple of months, but it's effectively two books in one. It showcases contemporary Australian residential architecture, and it also pays homage to the local designers and makers who have crafted bespoke pieces of furniture and lighting for these homes. It's a beautiful publication. Penny has, as I understand it, spent several years putting it all together, but I'm sure she's got a bit to say about that a little bit later on. One of the things that struck me about the book when I first came upon it was it called to mind Eliel Saarinen's famous injunction to always design a thing by considering it in its next larger context. A chair in a room in a house in an environment. This book tilts that injunction slightly on its side. It's considering design within its context, ultimately Australian design within the context of Australian architecture and interior design. So I was very excited when I heard this book was coming out, and it's certainly proven to be a great deal of fun to read. Penny herself has a background in architecture and design writing. She's worked, as I'm sure many of you know, for Artichoke magazine, Frame magazine in design, and she's now the co-director of the forthcoming Sydney Craft Week, which is going ahead, hopefully physically as well as virtually. So very much looking to hearing more about that. Of course, I won't be able to attend any of the physical events myself, but I'm looking forward to attending some of the virtual events. Penny, welcome.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah, I'm here from my house in Erskineville, so it's a bit of an odd way to have an event, but I'm excited to talk about my book.
I'm very happy to see lots of books in the background there. That's what we look for as publishers and bookstore owners. Well read. I wondered if you could start by perhaps telling us a little bit more about your background and what compelled you to put this book together.
Yeah, well, my first degree was in art history and curatorship, and initially I thought I'd like to become an art critic. It wasn't until I went to Amsterdam in 2005 that my eyes were open to the amazing world of design via Frame magazine, which was an amazing experience. It's still a brilliant magazine. And returning to Australia, I worked for a couple of design magazines, and just that day-to-day writing about design, it's just instilled a real love for me of design and architecture. Yeah, so I've wanted to write a book since forever, haven't we all? And I had contacted Thames and Hudson and said that I'd love to do something one day. Of course, I didn't hear back, but when Paulina, the publisher of this book, moved to Sydney, she got in touch and said that she'd like to meet me for lunch and to discuss possible book ideas, which is the kind of message that you dream of getting. So, and my master's of design was about objects, so furniture, lighting, object design, and I was looking at narratives, so how stories are attached to objects and how objects gain meaning from on one hand how they're made, who designed them, how they're designed, but also from how they're used and treasured and loved. So that really was the starting point for a book about how objects are used in a space and how they fit into the home where they are used on a daily basis. For me, that was really important, that these are real stories of real homes that are lived in every day, and that these are objects that are used every day. Because I think a lot of writing about design, especially furniture and that sort of thing, a lot of the writing about it is to sell it. So you're really writing about a kind of abstract idea of this chair. You might talk about how it's made or who the designer was, but you're never considering how it exists in the real world, how it's used, who owns it, how it's, that context. And that's really important, a really important part of an object story. So that was the beginning of the book.
Well, I think it's quite a nice segue to my next question, actually, which relates to that idea of a design in place, ultimately a kind of a life after it's been put out there into the world. But it's almost the reverse. I mean, the book, to borrow from the book blurb, the book itself describes Australian design as having forged its own unique trajectory, influenced by geographic isolation and a distinctive natural environment and a modern sensibility. Do you think it's fair to describe the designs and in fact the interiors and buildings within this book as kind of uniquely Australian in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think like design in many parts of the world, the influences on the architects and designers who are working on these works is really, it's both an international design sensibility and a local consideration. And I think those two things, some are more international, and are, some chairs designed in Australia, you couldn't pick them apart from a chair designed in Denmark or Amsterdam. There's no, visual difference. But then other things, like, for example, a Queenslander is, maybe it's similar to housing in some other parts of the world and some parts of Southeast Asia, for example, but a Queenslander is Queensland. It's specific to its place, and it's got certain characteristics that make it a Queenslander. So I think the designers and architects in this book, there's a real mix, and that's really what I wanted to show as well, that Australian architecture isn't just the beach house or the Queenslander. There's a whole range. There's big, there's small, there's apartments, there's urban areas, there's rural areas, there's and all budgets. So I really tried to give a mix. But I guess in doing that, I have, in a way, given a little bit of a snapshot of what Australian design is now, because it is varied, and Australian design is varied.
Well, Australia is, of course, very geographically varied. And if we're talking about a Queenslander, I have picked out a few choice spreads. And in fact, the first spread that I've picked is in fact a Queenslander by a Brisbane-based architectural practice called Boakes and Peters. Very particular, obviously, architectural tradition in Queensland, particularly in residential terms, quite different from perhaps the tradition we have here in Melbourne. I love Boakes and Peters' work because they've spent many years sort of looking at a very particular, not just the sort of Queenslander tradition, but also a suburban tradition of sort of subtropical lifestyle there in Brisbane and surrounds. And it's sort of, I guess, in many ways interested in that kind of slightly more relaxed lifestyle that we associate with Queensland as well, and that is a big part of living in that part of the world. But you've paired their Queenslander with a chair, the Archie chair, which of course is made in Melbourne. So I guess my next question really relates to whether or not there's a sort of a conversation potentially between the object and the architect's sensibility. Is there a conversation at play in some of these chapters between the object and the sort of architectural vernacular or the architectural tradition of perhaps some of those places, or even a conversation between the object and, I guess, the environment that they sit within, the climate they sit within?
Yeah, I mean, I think these two pieces of the architecture and the design in some ways are not similar, because while the Jardins, this Archie armchair is piece of Australian design, it's really modelled on a mid-century modern type of aesthetic that's been updated. Whereas the Queenslander, yes, it has contemporary, influences, and they've added brick, which is unusual for a Queenslander. So there are some new things, but they're not necessarily matchy-matchy, and yet they go so well together. And I think part of that in this case is that scale. If you go back to the where the armchair sits in the chair, in the room, it's so beautifully positioned there. And there's something about, again, as you say, the relaxed Queensland kind of feel of the house that really suits this chair, I think. Yeah, so, I mean, they chose it because it fit in the house. And it does. So I don't know if that's because it's a Queensland thing or not, but I'd say not, but it still works.
Could have been made for it. I think for me, what I love about this particular relationship here is that it's just the playfulness of the Archie chair and the playfulness of Oakes and Peters as well as a practice. They're deeply serious architects, but they have a very playful sensibility, and something about the geometry is particularly this spread. Yeah. I just love it.
I know this arch. They have 4 boys, this family, and you can imagine them rushing up and down these stairs and jumping off them, and and the shelves in the windows, just the right height to put your toy dinosaur on, things like that, and that quite graphic white on black is kind of mirrored in the white stitching on the Archie chair, on the is it navy or black? I think it's a deep the white navy on black. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
it's quite good.
And then you see the lovely geometry of the arch again repeated there, and then in the fireplace. But I think this elevation particularly is obviously, it's almost like a child's rendering of a house.
Yeah.
It's a lovely bit of architecture, and I think it's a wonderful chair, obviously, enormously successful for Jardin.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, how did you settle on the objects that you picked and the houses that you picked? Was that a difficult process? Was it hard to find Australian architecture and interiors with great Australian design within it?
Look, it wasn't easy. I mean, they exist. There's plenty of places that use Australian design, but I had a lot of things that I wanted to do with this book. And as I said earlier, I wanted that mix of big and small, suburban and rural, etc., etc. But I also, I wanted the products to be real, so not brought in for the photo shoot. I wanted them to be a major piece in the house, so not something tucked behind or a stool that you can only half see, or something like that. So they had to be major pieces, and I found them through both ways. So I found them through architects who I asked, do you have a recently completed house with a piece of Australian design in it? And I found them through the designers. Do you know of any recently completed houses that have your products in them? So it was sort of a mix. Yeah.
This is an Austin Maynard house. Austin Maynard, of course, are a Melbourne practice, very well known for their long-standing interest in sustainability, but also, I guess, sort of material innovation, a playfulness in the terms of their tectonics, the way they build their houses and the way they program their houses and so forth. I have to be honest, I wasn't aware of the black Sambuca chandelier until I saw the spread, and it is a spectacularly beautiful object. Could you tell me a little bit about what it is?
Yes, so this is a piece that's handmade by Ruth Allen, who's a Melbourne glass artist. And she works, she has a glass studio, and she works with an assistant, as all glass artists do. And she's really interested in recycling glass. So these are actual black Sambuca bottles, which are very distinctive. I'm sure you know them. They're very tall, black, long bottles. And she heats up the glass and stretches it and forms it into these shapes. So it's a gorgeous example of handmade lighting that's not by a designer at all, but by an artist, and a wonderful story of recycling.
Yeah, it certainly resonates, I think, with Austin Maynard's ethos, from the way I understand it, at least.
And it's so dramatic and kind of it's almost sexy, you know. It's really, it's gorgeous stuff. And you know, the way that it fits in with these black chairs with the black mesh screens all through the that kind of create this layering on top of the house. Yeah, it's a gorgeous project.
Yeah, I mean, that particularly, that shot there, it just looks like draped fabric, you know. It's silky, beautiful. I don't personally have positive associations with black Sambuca, but
the kind of
but
thing
now
you have
that's all changed.
When you should know better.
Indeed. The final chapter that I wanted to talk to is Indigo Slam, which many people will know. I first encountered this building when it was under construction. It sits in Sydney Central near UTS, quite close to the Jean Nouvel multi-residential tower. When I first saw it, I actually thought it was an institutional building, partly because of the proximity to the campus and so forth, but also just because of the scale. I mean, it is an absolutely phenomenal bit of architecture by Smart Design Studio. Could you tell us a little bit about this house?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's an extraordinary story. The house was built for Judith Nielsen, who is, I think at the time I was writing, she was Australia's second richest woman after Gina Reinhardt. She is an amazing arts patron. She owns the White Rabbit Gallery and has just opened a new arts facility, Phoenix, next door to Indigo Slam. And so she's done a lot for the Sydney's arts community. This building, you know, the name comes from a sort of pulp fiction novel, and Judith just liked the name, and so she never read the book, and she doesn't intend to, and she just liked the name. And, you know, she gave William Smart this just incredible commission to create a building that is, you know, it's kind of two buildings in one, because it had to be a building that was big enough to seat 64 people at a long table on the ground floor and hold functions for fundraisers and, you know, these huge events. And this is the central staircase, just incredible. But it also has to have a more intimate side to it. So the middle level is all the bedrooms, guest bedrooms, so her grandchildren can come and stay, and then on the top level it's her space, so kitchen, a small living room, another dining table. It's not small, but it's smaller, and her living quarters with the bathroom and that sort of thing. And he had to make it so that it was the right size for a single woman to live on this, you know, and then also be a semi-public space. So yeah, an amazing building, and what he's done with it, with this kind of pretty open brief, is just, you know, mind-boggling.
I wasn't aware of the furniture component of this story. In particular, I understand she commissioned over 100 or over 200 pieces from the furniture maker Kai Lu, South Australian furniture maker.
Yes, so he made over 100 bespoke pieces for this project. It took him and his team of 6 cabinet makers 4 years to create all of the furniture and some rugs and some other pieces. So everything you see in this photo, those 2 chairs, the sofa, the coffee table, the rug, and the dining chair in the background. All of that was designed by Kai Lu and made by his team of artisans in Adelaide. So an incredible commission. And Kai told me that the only other commission that he knows of this scale is Rockefeller commissioning Nakashima in the 1970s to make a couple of hundred pieces for his house. So this is like major patronage of the arts in a way. So Kai worked really closely with William Smart to get the right scale for each piece to make it fit into the space. And on the ground floor, that table is 16 meters long and seats 64 people. So just amazing.
A huge amount of work and obviously incredible craftsmanship. Kai Lu, his furniture is exquisite, and obviously well collected and so forth as well. I'm guessing this is probably the biggest commission of his life, I'd assume.
Yeah, and probably it could be the only chance that William Smart has to do a project this big and incredibly, well funded, and with this many, it's just a once in a lifetime type of project. Let's hope it happens again. But
phenomenal. Would be phenomenal for
if someone else this rich has this much taste, then it might happen again.
Don't think we'll be getting any Gina Reinhardt equivalents anytime soon, unfortunately. Or maybe for the best. I should mention now, guys, we are coming to the end of our allotted time, but if you do have any questions at all, audience members out there, then I'd encourage you to throw a question up on the Q&A. You'd be most welcome to. But before we wrap up, though, I do have a few more questions, of course, for you, Penny, particularly in regards to that patronage model. I mean, this is obviously a very particular example and it's extremely rare even internationally, but the book as a whole has made me kind of wonder whether or not there is a kind of patronage at play with some of these projects. Where is there a kind of burgeoning interest in Australian architects and interior designers, and in fact their clients, in supporting local design? Are we seeing more of it being specified? Or
absolutely. I think, certainly in the 90s and even in the 2000s, if you said high-end design, then you immediately thought of Italy, Scandinavia. And I think a lot of interior designers and architects would just specify European design if they wanted the best. But I think that's really changed in the last 10 or so years. And people are realizing that there's really good design here in Australia. And I think there's a lot more of it being made. And I think, as awful as this pandemic is, there may be opportunities for people to look closer to home for things like this, and maybe commission designers to create bespoke pieces, because I think there's definitely an appetite for this when it comes to homeowners who want something special. Because if you have a dining table that you use every day, and you will probably use every day for your whole life and pass on to your children, then, if you have the money, why not commission an incredible furniture designer to make that piece for you, for your house, that fits in with your life, and treasure it? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'd love to be able to commission some bespoke design myself, but having just commissioned a very modest and small bookshop from some fantastic local architects, architecture. I'm all done with my commissioning for the time being.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also available off the shelf as well. So, Jardin's a good example, but there's more and more shops that are selling Australian design.
Yeah, that's certainly true, and obviously lots of, even Alessi, in fact, is obviously becoming a bit of a patron of Australian design, and of course we've seen the likes of Colt and corporate culture and so forth as well, and of course local success stories like Jardin and so forth, which is great to see. Now I do have a question which I'm trying to pull up and I'm struggling a little bit for some reason. Why can't I see that? Oh. Oh dear. There's a question there and I can't quite read it for some reason. Oh, I apologize, people. If you prefer to throw the question into the chat, then please do. Otherwise, we'll probably wrap up there. Penny, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat. I'm sorry we couldn't have you in our physical bookshop, and hopefully,
well, one day.
Yeah, well, hopefully. Maybe not this year, but we'll see. You never know.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, here we go. Where are their designers? Someone's writing something halfway through. You saw pop up multiple times. Oh, that's a good question, actually. Were there favourites? Did you see people being specified routinely?
No. I maybe there weren't enough, but it was certainly. Oh no, that is not true. There was one designer who popped up a lot, and that is Kate Stokes from Coco Flip. Her lamp, which is a combination of spun metal and timber, is actually really well specified in Australian homes, which is really nice to hear. Female designer as well, which is kind of nice.
She's another Melburnian.
Yeah.
I mean, they have almost a ceramic quality to them as well, don't they? Even though
yeah, and just I think a really nice size for dining or living spaces.
Yeah, no, absolutely, a beautiful object. It does make me wonder, actually. Did you have a favourite object or in the book? That's a good question, possibly.
Yeah.
You got to pick a winner.
A really good. I really love the Archie armchair, so I think I just need to buy one. But I haven't got around to it yet. But I have been eyeing it off for so many years that I probably should just put my money where my mouth is.
I've been wondering it myself. The only thing that puts me off is we've got a bulldog and she's very slobbery.
Oh dear, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking I've got to stick with leather from now on if I buy anything more, but there you go. Oh, we have a thank you from Ross Didier. Fascinating insight. Really enjoyed hearing the author's narrative, and I certainly did. So thank you very much. If anybody's got a final question, you've got a minute or two to pop it, but other than that, we'll probably wrap up there. And of course, if you'd like to buy the book, we have the book available, and we are shipping every week, 2 to 3 times a week. So you'll have it within a few days, Australia Post allowing, of course. Oh, here we go. And from Mel Bale Smith, so proud that this book came to life after it was just an idea. I think.
Yes, Mel was one of those I ran things past in the early days.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I am very happy to see it out there in the world, and we've certainly been selling a few, even though we can't physically open. So that's a great
to hear.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you everybody, and thank you again, Penny. No doubt we'll talk soon. Hopefully, sometime you can visit our shop, and we'll see you in the flesh, as it were.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thanks again.
Okay, bye-bye.